A West African bloc gives Niger's coup leaders an ultimatum: restore the president or face the consequences.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky warns that war is coming back to Moscow following an attempted drone attack in the Russian capital.
Tourist businesses in eastern Poland say visitor numbers have halved since Russia's Wagner mercenaries began exercising over the border in Belarus. Brussels and Manila have announced a relaunch of free trade talks between the EU and the Philippines in a bid to boost growth and jobs.
Waving Russian flags and chanting "Down with France," thousands of people staged a protest outside the French embassy in Niamey on Sunday in support of the junta that took over Niger earlier this week. Niger's former colonial ruler, France, has condemned the coup, with President Macron warning that he would not tolerate any threats to France and its interests. The French government has also suspended aid and security cooperation to Niger, demanding the return of ousted leader Mohamed Bazoum. The situation in Niger remains delicate, with some hostile to any foreign attempts to influence affairs.
I would like also to say to the European Union, African Union and ECOWAS, please stay out of our business.
Meanwhile, the West African regional group ECOWAS has warned the junta to cede power within a week or face extreme sanctions and possible use of force.
Hospitals were overwhelmed in northwest Pakistan on Sunday following a blast at a political rally. At least 44 people are known to have died and nearly 200 people were wounded, including children. The attack was aimed at supporters of a hardline cleric and political leader in the country's Bajour district that borders Afghanistan. No one has claimed responsibility, but local officials say it was meant to weaken Pakistani Islamists. An investigation into what's thought to have been a suicide bombing is underway.
Supporters and opponents of the Palestinian Hamas government briefly clashed in Khan Yunis in the Gaza Strip on Sunday, throwing stones at one another and setting fire to tyres. The clashes erupted after several thousand people briefly took to the streets across the territory to protest chronic power outages and difficult living conditions in a rare public show of discontent with Hamas. At one point, people in the crowd were burning Hamas flags before police moved in to break up the protest. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has warned that war is coming to Moscow following an attempted drone attack in the Russian capital. Russia's defense ministry reported that 3 Ukrainian drones were downed on Sunday, with 2 crashing into Moscow's business district. At least 1 person was injured in what the Kremlin described as an attempted terrorist attack by the Kyiv regime.
Російська агресія зазнала банкрутства на полі бою. Сьогодні вже 522-й день, як триває так звана спеціальна воєнна операція, яку російське керівництво розраховувало на тиждень-два. Україна стає міцніше, поступово війна повертається на територію Росії, до її символічних центрів та військових баз, і це неминучий, природній та абсолютно справедливий процес.
Meanwhile, images of Russia's latest strike show extensive damage in the city of Sumy in northeastern Ukraine. 2 people were killed and 20 wounded after a Russian missile struck a 4-story building belonging to a vocational college. Zelensky has told government officials he expects Russia to resume its attacks on Ukraine's energy system when the weather gets colder in the autumn.
Eastern Poland's ancient forests, a traditional tourist destination now bristling with military hardware. Tensions have been ramped up since Russia's mercenary Wagner group moved into neighbouring Belarus.
Państwo polskie podjęło decyzję o budowie zapory wzdłuż całej granicy z Białorusią i ta zapora jest ciągle rozbudowywana i wzmacniana, jest uszczelniana w ten sposób nasza granica. Mamy także zwiększoną obecność Wojsko-Polskiej Straży Granicznej, tak żeby zamanifestować naszą sprawność oraz gotowość ewentualnej obrony, ale mam nadzieję, że do tego nie dojdzie. Jesteśmy członkiem Paktu Północnoatlantyckiego, mamy że na terenie państwa także wojska sojusznicze.
The Ministry of Defence says in addition to the newly organised military unit in Kolno, Poland is also reinforcing Griovo, Szymatysia and Czerwony Bor. While Poland is arming itself against possible provocations from Wagner's side, tourists are changing their holiday plans as a precaution, with some tourism businesses saying visitor numbers have halved.
To nie jest siła, która generalnie może wygenerować jakieś realne niebezpieczeństwo na tym terenie. Natomiast jest to bardzo mocno wykreowane przez władze, którym skończył się temat zagrożenia ze strony uchodźców. Wagnerowcy po prostu pojawili się jako nowa figura straszenia. Straszą efektywnie i powodują to, że następuje jakiś taki kolejny etap zniechęcenia turystów. Ludzie odwołują rezerwacje, ludzie pytają, czy mogą iść do lasu, na przykład właśnie, czy nie nastąpi jakiś atak.
Many people in the area say they're tired of the army presence, the noise and the constant checks, but are afraid to speak about it openly on camera, fearing of potential consequences. Some blame media's spin ahead of forthcoming elections for exacerbating the situation.
Na chwilę obecną mamy zbliżającą się kampanię wyborczą. I jak włączymy przekaz na TVN1, no to możemy zauważyć to, że tak, bezpieczne Podlasie, bardzo dużo policji, tysiące żołnierzy, żeby było bezpiecznie. Jak włączymy na TVN24 grupę Wagnera, niby szturmuje granicę wschodnią. Nic takiego tu nie ma miejsca.
Since Russia's full-scale invasion of Ukraine, Poland has increased its defense spending to 4% of its GDP, with the potential to reach 5% according to politicians' declaration. Thus, Poland has become one of the countries with the largest military investments in the entire NATO. Magdalena Hodownik for Euronews from Białowieża.
The EU is to relaunch negotiations with the Philippines on an ambitious free trade deal. Ursula von der Leyen made the announcement with President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. in Manila. Trade talks with the bloc stalled under his predecessor.
Our teams will get to work right now on setting the right conditions so that we can get back to the negotiations. A free trade agreement has huge potential for both of us in terms of growth and in terms of jobs.
I welcome the conduct of this year of the scoping exercises between the European Commission and the Philippines towards negotiations for a Philippines-EU free trade agreement.
The two leaders also signed an agreement on promoting a greener economy in the Philippines. It comes under the EU's Team Europe initiative, which helps partner countries' infrastructure needs in fighting climate change. The focus in this case is on tackling plastic waste in the sea.
Firefighters have been able to calm the flames of various wildfires that broke out on the Greek peninsula of Peloponnese on Saturday. 3 fires that started in 4 villages in the region of Ilia as well as in the municipality of ancient Olympia have been contained, according to the Greek fire brigade. On the island of Rhodes, the devastation caused by the flames is all too clear from the air. 30,000 people had to be evacuated in recent days. Authorities now say it is safe to return, although the risk of further fires remains high due to weeks of drought. Meanwhile, violent thunderstorms accompanied by strong gusts of wind hit several areas in the Alto Adige region in northeast Italy, causing widespread damage but no injuries or deaths. The fire brigade carried out rescues as overflowing mountain torrents swept away wooden bridges, destroyed roads and triggered mudslides.
Will we see Russian and Belarusian athletes in neutral uniforms at the Paris Olympics? The International Olympic Committee has still not made a decision on this issue, and in the meantime, qualifications for many Olympic disciplines are already in full swing. So what awaits the athletes?
Since 1992, the age of boycott has been over. But now it's a new situation with the Russian invasion in Ukraine, and the IOC tries to find a middle ground by permitting athletes from Russia and Belarus as neutral athletes. But since there's so much resistance by many federations and national Olympic committees, I think we will just see a very limited presence of athletes from those two countries.
In March, the IOC recommended that Russian and Belarusian athletes who did not publicly support the war in Ukraine be allowed exclusively in a neutral status. But many Olympic sporting bodies have not yet developed criteria for the return of Russian and Belarusian athletes to compete in their competitions.
And the IOC made it clear that nobody who was in the army, who publicly supported the war, would be permitted at the Olympics. So this sets the bar already quite high.
This week, a year before the opening of the Olympic Games in Paris, the IOC carried out the traditional distribution of invitations to the Games' National Olympic Committees. 203 countries are invited, except for Russia and Belarus. With the Ukraine war ongoing, the IOC will most likely make a decision as late as spring 2024.
It's a very critical decision and situation, and it's not the only conflict in the world. And we should also not forget that many Russian and Belarusian athletes are not in favor with the war. So it's very difficult to answer the question where to draw the line. So the IOC tries here to find a compromise that suits everybody.
Estonian daredevil Jan Roos has set a new world record for the longest LED-lit single-building slackline walk at the Qatar Towers in Qatar. The three-time slackline world champion battled high winds to keep his balance and cover a distance of more than 150 metres between the twin towers. The Sparkline walk was not only the longest on a single building, but also Roos's highest urban walk to date, at an elevation of more than 185 metres on a line that was just 2.5 centimetres wide.